Alright, what's up guys? So what we're gonna be doing right now is we're going to with God's help continue the initialization of this reference errors that we've been up to. So we're going to learn this one. Last one we did this one. So the goal is, if you have this error, then what you could do probably is try to maybe recreate it and see if it will fit into what you're doing. Maybe by doing the fix for this error, you could also fix whatever error you might be having, or you're just trying to learn the errors with us. So yeah, we're gonna try to recreate this with God's help. ChatGPT. Okay. So to build the dead zone console, let A, your reference A before has been initialized. The variables declared as even though the variables declaration is hoisted. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So this is called reference errors. TDZ, we're going to call this TDZ, temporal dead zone. God forbid. TDZ.js to TDZ.js. Okay. So what we're going to do, hello. Okay. Now it's good. Console.log A, let A equals 1. Alright, let's see. Error mastery series CD2. Oops. CD2. Alright. CD. Node 2. Okay. Reference error. A cannot access A before initialization. Interesting. So even though it's hoisted, but it's not hoisted. How could he say it's hoisted? Okay. So remember, you guys, we're just trying to learn about these errors. At the same time, we are, with God's help, we will solve them. Okay. Let's ask ChatGPT to go for this one. Okay. Hello. Okay. Sorry about that. Excuse me. A little bit of technical difficulties here, but excuse me. Alright. Now we got this. Okay. Reference cannot access A before initialization. All right. Can access area for initialization. All right, so let's add ChatGPT real quick. What do you mean even though it's hoisted? If isn't hoisting mean that it will avoid the reference error though, or like any error? Excuse me. That's the tricky part. Hoisting in JavaScript doesn't mean you can use it early without problems. It just means the variable exists in the variable's existence is known to the engine from the top of the scope. Hoisting has two phases in the JS engine. The creation phase. The engine scans your code and registers variable names var for it creates the variable initialized undefined. It creates binding, does not initialize it yet. Execution phase. Okay. What errors you think you would have to do that by recreating them and solving them you would understand this whole thing here. All right. Excuse me. Awesome. Learning by recreating the mistakes. Here's a focus area lab to master TDZ and friends. For each time that fail code, first observe the error output and then fix the lesson. Excuse me. Alright, we'll try to get this guy over here. Let's try to send it one more time. Oh man, what's going on over here? Fix TDZ with const reference error var hoisting fail no error surprising output. Fix that's interesting. Initialize to undefined. Save the throws identifier. All right. hoisted binding exists. How are you supposed to understand hoisting though if it happens pre-interpreter like during the parsing phase? No. Exactly, and that's the mind bender with hoisting. You can't literally see it happen at runtime because the rearrangement of variable and metadata is done before your code starts executing during. But you can understand by thinking of two mental models. Could you understand somehow by passing more errors though? If yes, what would you need? How much? And are they? Alright, so we're trying to understand not only this little reference error, but a little bit about the hoisting also. You know. No. Okay, hopefully that will make it easier a little bit on the engine. Totally, you can learn hoisting by breaking it. Here's a compact error lab, core 18 mistakes that if you recreate them and fix them, it will make a two-phase model creation with execution. Okay. Let's copy all these. Oh, dang it. Okay, here you go. Seems like I got it. Seems like I got all of them. Alright, so maybe we're gonna have to add another hoisting kind of path to our GitHub error mastery library. Let's see. Add file. Create new file. Hoisting mastery. Mastery.js. Alright. Okay, fine. Commit changes. Hoisting error master.js. By breaking, here's a compact 18 mistakes. Okay. Fix Maybe we gotta edit this. Maybe we'll make it just text. Dot text. All right. All right. So alright, totally. You can learn hosting by breaking it. Okay. So we did this one today. Fix, then cons, let's not hosted, but initialized. Fix declare first. Okay, so let's learn about this. So you know how you know if it's uninitialized or still. How it behaves. Before the declaration line is executed, you get. Okay. That specific error, the binding exists, so it was hoisted in the creation phase. Excuse me. What do you mean the binding exists, though? When I say the binding exists, I mean during the creation phase before any code runs, the JavaScript engine scans your scope and creates an entry in its internal variable environment. Before the code runs, the JavaScript scans your code. Okay, hold up. Okay, sorry. Okay, so let's continue. Alright, so during the creation phase, the JavaScript scans your code and creates an entry in its internal variable environment. Okay, the binding exists during the creation phase before any code runs. The JavaScript engine scans your scope and creates an entry that is in its internal variable environment. For that name, it is like the engine saying, okay, there will be a variable called A, scope, analogy, imagine a mailbox. Binding exists. The mailbox is installed and labeled with your name A, so that the postman knows where to deliver. Initialize. The first piece of mail, a value is put inside. Uninitialized, the mailbox is there, but it's locked, shut, until the delivery guy puts the first letter. You can't even open it early. the mailbox is there, but it's locked until the delivery guy opens, officially puts the first letter. You can't open it. What matters TDZ, binding exists, hosting an environment record, no value uninitialized, access. So when you declare ever with let const class, it actually makes a mailbox, so to say. It's locked. Okay. So binding is this host in the environment record, no value uninitialized. Access. Why is it isn't hoisted mean goes oops, sorry guys. Yeah, that's exactly where the confusion comes in. People say hoisted, it means the code is getting hoisted up, but that's not literally what happens. What hoisted means, when we say something is hoisted, we mean the declaration is processed during the creation phase before any code executes. So the variable name is known to the scope from the very start. That doesn't mean the code is rearranged or that the value is there early. Hoisted just means the order of operations, like variables get declared first in the parsing. No? Yep, that's the core of it. When we say hoisted in the JavaScript, we're really talking about the order of operations in the JavaScript. During parsing, two-phase execution model. Phase 1, aka hoisting phase. The variable scans the scope. Variable declarations and functions for each binding created and initialized to undefined. Undefined. Binding created but uninitialized. Function. Binding and what do you mean though? Declare the engine knows the variable exists in the current scope during the creation phase. It adds an entry in the scope of the variable environment for that name. It's like putting a mailbox with your name on it in the scope. No matter where you declare it in your code, this part happens before the execution starts. And initialized to undefined for var. In the same creation phase, the engine immediately puts the value into that box, into that mailbox. That's why you can do this without an error, because in phase 1, engine creates the binding and sets its value to undefined. Phase 2, okay, let's just try to learn these errors. Reference error, fix, hoisted, but okay, let's try doing with a const. Reference error. Cannot access a bit before initialization. Okay. It's like a mailbox that's locked. Fix. Declare first and then initialize. Let's ask it, what does it mean? Oops. What does it mean initialize though? What does it mean initialize? Initialize means put the first value into a variable binding in memory so it can be read without error. Why would it be read with an error though? Is there a way to intentionally cause these errors, by the way? It would be read with an error in the TDZ case because the engine knows if initialized. Are you saying it would be an memory error though? Not exactly memory error, like JavaScript reference error in the TDZ is a language level rule baked into the spec. The engine could technically give you undefined there, but it's designed not to. What's really happening under the hood? Think of scope variables like a memory map for variables. Memory map for variables. So force initialize. In a sense, in C, using initialized memory might give you whatever random bits RAM in JavaScript you get to live at runtime error. Spec says throw here to protect you. Cannot reference A before initialization. It's not because memory is broken, it's because the engine is enforcing the temporal dead zone rule. What is the temporal dead zone rule? The rule is that a variable declared with let const cannot be accessed before the point in code where the declaration is executed. If you try, the engine must throw a reference error. It's about time when the execution sequence used. Many errors have to do to understand. Like recreating and solving after, though. You get a solid understanding of the temporal dead zone rule by deliberately recreating and fixing 8 targeted errors. Alright, so this one. Now wait. Right, there's no lower back level back there. Oops. Sorry. Because variable binding is part of lexical environment record. It's until it's initialized that binding is a special initialized state. And bindings. How many? Not just TDZ, but all different ways variable bindings behave, and how we can learn by breaking them on purpose. Okay. So it's lib before initialization. Covered above. Shadowing creates a new TDZ. Okay. Let's see if we can ever make a hoisting error mastery. File. Things. Story.text. Commit changes. Okay, excuse me. Shadowing creates new TDZ. Alright, so let's see if it did that. All right. Alright, great target to zoom in. Here's what shadowing creates. Excuse me. A new TDZ. Outer variable exists but hidden. Means plus clicks repos. When you declare const inside a block within the same name, as an outer variable, the inner variable shadows the outer one from the start of that inner block until. Alright. Basic block shadowing. Message, okay. cannot access message before initialization. Alright. Dang, that's crazy. Cannot message before initialization. If block. Alright, so it seems like we probably just shouldn't dive too deep in this. Maybe it's not healthy right now. You know, maybe it's something we'll understand what goes up along the way. Console.a cannot access A before initialization. But still, what is initialization? Let's see. What are the errors? By doing them, you will understand initialization, though. Binding before initialization, before constant initialization, class before initialization, new class, shadowing, creates a new initialized binding, cannot declare variable, cannot access A before initialization. Okay, so just need to access, you just have to initialize it. Type of binding. Find. So putting and call of var. If you call access comes before the variable's initialization point, you're trying to read below. The problem is purely about when JavaScript actually does initialization, not where it's written. Two phases. JS script goes through excuse me, creation phase before execution, declares variables, leaves uninitialized, var gets immediately initialized and undefined. Execution phase runs your code to the top, runs your code top to bottom. The moment it hits let, that's when the binding is initialized with 5. The moment when the binding is initialized with 5, that's when the binding is initialized with 5. Excuse me. Here at the time const, we're still in execution before the engine reaches the initialization line. The binding exists, but it's uninitialized. Ah, dang, that's where the error hits. So in the execution phase, in the execution phase, the binding, dang, that's pretty crazy. Why it works for var? Here the creation phase got initialized to undefined immediately. So by the time execution hits console log, you're reading undefined, not an error. Why JS script? The spec with TDZ. So what can you actually hoist though? Say hi. Yeah. What happens? Creation phase binding is created and initialized. But this is because functions get initialized first before var. Yes. Dang, the JavaScript process function declarations first. Actual function way. Alright, that makes so much more sense, you guys. Alright, this is very interesting. We learned a little bit about the creation phase and execution phase. So the binding is initialized with 5. Why below? It's too late. Why is the temporal dead zone though. Tempo is about time when in execution order you try to use. Excuse me. Why isn't it called order of operations error? Get what you think order. You just ran console before. What's wrong with the order? About order precedence, about variable lifecycle in the JavaScript engine. You can have variables out of order in code, no error. Example 4 lets you access variable before its assignment. You just get undefined. Yeah. The tempo is accurate. Tempo is the restriction tied to time and execution from scope. Entry until it's tied to time. How is it tied to time though? It's tied to time in the literal sense that whenever you can use, it's tied to time in the literal sense that whether you can use the variable depends on when the program's execution, when in the program's execution you try to access it. Gotcha. The moment codes enter a scope where a let and const is declared, the binding is created, left initialized. From that point on until the code reaches the actual declaration line in the variable is the temporal dead zone. Dang, that's crazy. JavaScript creation phase function declarations are actually processed before var declaration functions. Dang, that's crazy. Alright, you guys, so we learned some crazy stuff about these about this creation phase that happens in the, let's say it's called parsing cycle. So this creation phase is the par phase part of the both the parsing compilation parsing cycle. What did you parsing? They're tied to bigger parsing cycle, parsing phase, syntax analysis. The JS reads your code and builds abstract syntax tree. Creation phase, execution phase. Dang, that's crazy. Code builds an abstract tree. That's funny. This is syntax here. Everything runs. Okay, fine. Dang, that's crazy. So we got the parsing phase. We got parsing phase. And we got the creation phase, and then we got the execution phase. Very interesting. And today we actually learned about the creation phase. And you know what, you guys? A lot of this stuff makes more sense, especially in the parsing side, projects that we've been doing. It's making much more sense. Like, there's a phase that it's an error that happens in the parsing phase. Here, however, our error happens over here in the creation phase. And it would be interesting if we get however, it happens, I think, in the execution phase, but we are actually able to witness what's happening in the creation phase. And by knowing these both, we can understand where how the reference error happens. Alright, so that was really interesting. So just to recap, the variables, they get declared after the functions, but since we don't have any functions, it's like the first thing that gets declared. But the problem is, in the execution, it's supposed to it gets initialized as it goes down. And since this is the first thing that happens, we get this error here. Because if it was over here, initialization, let's triple check over here. Initialization happens in the execution phase, no? Yeah. Okay. Execution phase initializes the binding. Okay, fine. So okay, fine. So it initializes the binding, but the problem is it hits this console log. That's how I understand it so far. And because it hits the console log before it actually hits the const, initialization of the const, that's why it gives us that this was referenced before the initialization. Alright, so that's why we have to first initialize it, make sure it gets initialized first. And we get 1. And we also learned that functions there's in the creation phase, they're the first things that get let's double check exactly how it exactly said it. Creation phase, it gets declared first in the declared, they're processed, yeah. So say they processed before the variables function say hi. Okay, so we got this. So log hi. So we're gonna say hi. We're gonna call it even before it's. Hey, look at this. So there's no error because this guy, when the whole in the creation phase, these things get processed first, even before this, which is crazy. Even before this. So some cool stuff over here. Hi. And then this, if we put it over here, even though this gets processed first, it gets initialized after the const, which is not right. It has to be initialized before the const because this gets see. Alright guys, that was a really cool programming tutorial in JavaScript today. With God's help, we'll be back with you guys in the next couple of videos. Alright guys, peace.